What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Dead Ball TV. I got another beast of a video for you guys here today about Asian football, this time focused entirely on Group C of AFC World Cup qualifying after the March window. How this video is going to go down is I'm going to recap how the table is looking right now, and then I got a series of talking points about every single team. We're going to go through those one by one. If you guys like Asian football, I want to let you know now that Groups A and B should already be out on the channel. And I got plenty, and I mean plenty of other videos covering the AFC dropping here on Dead Ball TV. So if you're a fan of Asian football, if you know somebody who's a fan of Asian football, hit subscribe and share the channel with them. That would be much appreciated. Drop a like on the video if you could. There's a lot of research and time that goes into prepping these videos. And I'm going to do my best to keep this under 20 minutes, although I'm certainly going to fail. I just have a feeling in the back of my mind that that's just not really a possibility here. And let me know down below in the comments how you guys are feeling about your national team after this window. Was it a great window? Why? Was it a disaster? Why? I want to hear from you guys down below. So Group C, after 8 days, Japan in first and qualified to the World Cup on 20 points. Australia in second on 13 points. Saudi Arabia in third on 10 points. Indonesia in fourth on 9. Bahrain in fifth with 6 points. And China in last place with 6 points. There's a lot to talk about from Group C. I feel like we had a very entertaining window from this group. I'm going to start with Australia, though. I'm going to go to the land down under. Koalas are my favorite animal, so it only makes sense that I start with, the Socceroos. 5-1 win against Indonesia in the first game during this window. I thought it was a good performance for Australia. I think maybe I was a bit too negative in my immediate match reaction. I was not trying to say or suggest that this was a flukish win for Australia, because it wasn't. What I was trying to say is, despite the 5 goals, which anytime you score 5 goals, you played pretty well, right? But despite the 5 goals, I don't think that Popovich has figured out this offense. I still think if you look at Australia and how they create goals, even in the China game, there's not really a high volume here. And not only that, there's not really like a massive quality of the chances. I really feel if you look at the 7 goals that Australia scored during this window, I would say 2 of them, maybe 3, were pretty good goals. 2 of them were set pieces. 1 was a goalkeeper howler, and I think 1 was a penalty, right? So they scored a lot of goals, which is great, especially for Australia. I mean, offensively, these guys were dead, absolutely dead under Graham Arnold. And they're still not totally back under Popovich, but this is certainly a step in the right direction. I just didn't want Australians to, or people who didn't watch the game and aren't Australian, to be like, wow, Australia's attack is incredible. No, I wouldn't go that far. I would say that the defense was pretty good in both of these games. But specifically on the Indonesia game, I think another reason I wasn't so super hype about it is that we were nearly at a disaster for Australia, right? If Indonesia scored the penalty in the first 10 minutes of the game, a first 10 minutes in which, all the fans seemed to be Indonesian, it was rocking every single time they touched the ball, and the Indonesian high press was giving Australia a lot of problems to start the game. If that penalty is scored, then who knows what happens. Now, the ball didn't go in the back of the net. That's what we know. And what happened is that Australia went on to score a penalty of their own through Martin Boyle, and then it was kind of just abusing the Indonesian high line, abusing the fact that I think Indonesia was too unorganized with new players in the lineup, new formation, new manager. It just became a little too much. I think the penalty miss sunk them, and then you see, 2 goals conceded in 2 minutes or whatever it was from Velupele, moments after the Boyle penalty. It was good from Australia, but it was not the best performance I've ever seen. And then, of course, the 2-0 win away in China, which is extremely important. But again, you look at the performance. Australia did exactly what they needed to do. They scored a goal. They got 2 goals, actually. And they said, okay, China, break us down. And China said, well, that would require us to know how to play football. And we're not really sure we know how to do that. And it was pretty cushy, comfortable. I mean, I don't know how many moments Matt Ryan had in this game. There's a couple of corner kicks that looked mildly scary, sure, but China, I'll get to them later in the video. Those lads can't create. If Australia struggled to create some chances, China got to be the worst team in round 3. Like, there's just nothing generated in this side whatsoever. I mean, even in this game, you look at the Jackson Irvine goal, class, absolute class. That man is a beast. But the Velupele goal, I mean, it's shot right at Dalai Wong, and he spills it. It might be the worst howler I've seen in round 3 so far of qualifying, and that was that. China's never, ever in a million years coming back 2 goals down against Australia, they walk out with the 6 points. And I think it's absolutely massive. That's the number one thing I have written down is that Australia, arguably the biggest winners from this window of all the teams that participated. And this is kind of why I picked Australia as the team to emerge from the chaos of Group C, because it was a disaster. Everything was on fire. It was the SpongeBob meme that you guys have seen many, many times. But I felt like Australia had the most pieces left to play. This is kind of how I looked at Australia versus every single team in Group C, and I would love for you guys to chime in here. So Australia as kind of the solid team that was just making a couple mistakes that were a bit uncharacteristic of them, and I felt like they were going to come good, especially with the new appointment. In comes Popovich, and I think we're seeing that. Bahrain as a national team, I think they have maxed out. Well and truly, I think they've maxed out. If you look at Bahrain, who again I'll talk about later, they have a very strong starting 11 and almost nothing else. So if anything has to happen to Bahrain, if they got to go to plan B, there is no plan B. They only have plan A, which is capitalize on the other team's mistakes and try to not make mistakes of our own. That's really all they can do. So I never really saw Bahrain as being able to suddenly go into another gear like I did for Australia or for Saudi Arabia, who I think with Saudi Arabia, I'm not sure how many more cards they have to play. I think it's more of a case where Renard and Mancini before him were kind of victim to the level of the Saudi players that were playing. I don't think there's 10 different Saudi players sitting in the background that they can call upon and just reshuffle the squad. I think the starting 11 for the most part picks itself, and they're at the mercy of how clinical Saudi Arabia wants to be. So I think they had a good chance to finish in second, but not as good as Australia in my opinion. And then Indonesia, who I guess you could say have infinite cards to play, actually, if you want to think about it like that, because they could just recruiting people. I think Indonesia shuffles too much, and I think they shuffled too much despite the success that they were experiencing. It seemed like there's no satiating how Indonesia feels about their dual NAT situation, or of course about Shin Tae-yong and their manager, who got the biggest win in Indonesian history, and they sacked him as a result of it. So I think there's such thing as tinkering with the lineup too much, and I think that was Indonesia's problem versus Australia, where it was more obvious that they needed a kind of, hey, let's rip the Band-Aid off and get moving here. It feels like Indonesia have ripped the Band-Aid off a couple times, and now the scab is just bleeding all over the place, and it's probably infected now. And then China, who are just dead. Like they're just a dead national team. They got the worst offense ever. They never had any chance of qualifying. If China had finished in second, it would have been the most shameful thing to happen in Socceroos history. Like it would have been on that level because that's how bad this national team is. So that's why I backed Australia to kind of figure it out, shuffle the deck one time, but not do anything too drastic. And I think Popovich has done a great job there. I will continue talking about Popovich now because the man made some big calls in the lineup. When his selection dropped, I didn't see a happy Australian in sight. I watched several videos. I follow several of y'all on Twitter. Not a damn person was happy. No Iracunda again. Do you know how big of a risk and a gamble that was? After how Iracunda has been playing at Grasshopper recently, and the fact that the biggest problem for Australia was creation, and Popovich said, nah, I'm good. I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm going to stick to the guys that I know. And they delivered. Popovich was vindicated for his risk there. And I think the guys that he's called in, wow, I mean, it's paid off. Is creation still a problem for Australia? Absolutely. But at least now it seems like Craig Goodwin and Riley McGree have a little bit of help trying to create things. Right? I thought Velupile, I don't think he was great against China, but I thought he was very good in the Indonesia game. He was doing a very good job helping to move the ball around. He's got a good defensive work rate. I thought it was a good showing from him. I didn't know who he was. Another guy I didn't know who he was, Ryan Teague. Never heard of Ryan Teague in my life. I'm not that deep in Australian ball. Sorry. But the guy looked really solid against China. Now, albeit it was China, but he was there to do a job and he did it. Other guys, Jason Garria, like I said, I didn't know who that guy was. Now he's been brought in. He's been a starter in every single game. Yeah, I guess he got done by Romney on the one goal, but outside of that, he's barely put a foot wrong. He's been a great player, great introduction. Brandon Borrello. That guy's been irrelevant for Australia forever, and I thought in the China game, he was really important when Australia was still pushing for a goal, when it was still 0-0. I thought he was great, dropping deep, helping in the build-up play, doing way more than Mitchell Duke has done in 5 years. offering the team more than Yangi, who I guess can sometimes hold the ball up, but other times not really. I think Popovich deserves a lot of credit for this because it was a tough decision for him to make. And if Australia had dropped anything here, they had drawn China away, drawn Indonesia at home, God forbid lost, I don't even want to know what the Australian media would be saying right now. They would be saying, we should have kept Arnold. This was a mistake. There was a lot on the line here for Popovich, and he needed to take 6 points, and he did. And so just shout out to that man. I think he's done an impressive job so far. And now I guess we're looking ahead to the Saudi Arabia clash in the last window where Australia didn't want to go into that match needing a win. And that would have been the case were they to have dropped points in this window. Now they're going into that Riyadh game, getting to lean back on their trap card, which is defense. Bunker down, make it ugly. I know Saudi Arabia beat them in 2022 off a pen, but it doesn't mean that's going to happen again. It's just a good, advantageous position for Australia to be in. They could have dropped the ball. They didn't. I think Popovich and the players deserve credit for that. And I just got to shout out two specific players on Australia. Jackson effing Irvine, bro. This guy, from my perspective as a non-Australian, has been the best player for 2 years now, longer. I mean, it's been incredible what this guy's doing. He's an interception god. He just disrupts everything in the middle of the pitch. Is he super technical? No. Does he have the happiest feet when he's dribbling? No. Although his goal against China was pretty good. But he's been so consistent. He seems like he's the heart and soul of this team. He's got swag. Absolutely love that guy and super happy that he got multiple goals in this window. Just a great story for Jackson Irvine. And Lewis Miller. I'm going to be honest, y'all. I didn't really know much about Lewis Miller before the Asian Cup game against South Korea. If you know, you know. And I thought that this guy had no value as a footballer. I was like, how is this man playing for Australia? How far have they fallen? When in reality, especially in round 3, if you want to talk about the better players, the consistent players, the guys that just aren't making dumb mistakes or howlers costing this team, Lewis Miller has to be top 3 for Australia. When he's booming down the right-hand side, that's when the team is the most dangerous. They need this man as part of the lineup. He has been crucial. And I feel like there were some doubts, for myself included, when Sarkati goes down, Jordan Boss being available for 2 of the 8 games. I feel like he's barely played. Lewis Miller stepped up. He stepped up. I'm not saying he's the GOAT, but I am saying he's had a very good qualifying campaign. And I feel like I needed to say that because I have said negative things about him in the past. And yeah, I think he's proved me wrong. So, A+ window for Australia. Shout out to Popovich. Shout out to the players. Any Socceroos fans, I hope a little bit of the faith has been restored. Let's move on to Saudi Arabia next. 1-0 win at home against China in Riyadh. How this game ended 1-0 is really explained by Saudi Arabia themselves, just being non-clinical. We know this. Worst converting team in round 3 of qualifying. I've said that time and time and time again. And guess what? It still remained true, even in this window. But I will say they looked better, and namely Salim Al-Dosri looked better, and they need that man to be firing in peak powers if they're going to potentially snag that second spot from Australia. I thought the other Al-Dosri was pretty solid. Musab Al-Jawer continues to be a staple. He's going to start for Saudi Arabia for the next decade. I think he's great. Al-Tambakti, beast of a defender. They still don't really have a 9, right? They still don't have the goals here, but as a performance, it was much improved from the first earlier games under Irv Renard in his return. And then the 0-0 draw against Japan. Now, look, I don't really know what to analyze here. I'm going to get to Japan next. I feel like Saudi Arabia did exactly what they needed to do, which was get a point. There was never a world here where Saudi Arabia was going to beat Japan. But they wanted to get out of this window with 4 to give them a good chance in the final window to get direct qualification. And that's exactly what they did. They were sweating a lot in the first 25 minutes. Japan missed a couple sitters. And then I think Japan just said, all right, we're good. We don't want to lose at home, so we're gonna try, but not that hard. And Saudi Arabia tried really hard to preserve the clean sheet and to get a point in Japan, and they did it. And job well done to the Saudis. I really don't know what else to say about that. My main notes here is that for Renard and Saudi Arabia, it was a good window, getting the 4 points. All eyes are on that Rifa game against Bahrain in match day 9. If they win that, oh my goodness, then yeah, it's coming down to the final game against Australia, and it's going to be I mean, I cannot freaking wait. I guarantee I'm going live for that, so hit subscribe. But I still think their goal scoring issues are an issue. And it's hard to analyze the offense at all against Japan because they didn't play footy. Like, they basically just kicked it long, stalled as much as possible. Japan were cool to not really play either. And that was it, bro. That was the whole game. So I'm really focusing most of my analysis on the China match, in which I thought that the Saudis looked better. It looked like a more dangerous attack than what we've seen against other teams, even before the China red card, right? And I know that certainly made it worse, and that eliminated the chance of a China comeback. But it was kind of a weird window if you look at it for Saudi Arabia, where they got not even challenged remotely in the first game, and then the second game they didn't remotely challenge, right? And they just completely flipped the script on what they needed to do depending on their opponent. So yeah, is it like a A+ window like Australia? I don't know if it's an A+ window. I'd probably go B+. I'll probably go B+ for the Saudis for what they're able to do, get a point off Japan. Yeah, I think that's impressive. So we move. And next up, we'll talk about Japan. 2-0 win at home against Bahrain. It was a little sloppy from Japan to start. They didn't really have to defend too hard against Bahrain, although Bahrain always create a couple scary chances every single game. That's just how they play as a national team. They really, really wait for their moment. And Japan defensively responded when necessary. Offensively, I thought Kubo was very good. One of his better games for the Samurai Blue that I've seen in a while. Almost had a brace. It was just really, Bahrain couldn't contain him whatsoever. And I think Wataru Endo is just such a beast for Japan that he's one player I do not think it's the flowers that he needs for everything that he contributes, both offensively and defensively. And then, of course, the 0-0 draw at home to Saudi Arabia. And I really feel like Japan kind of bottled this opportunity and were a little disrespectful to their own fans. I felt like Japan tried for about 20 minutes and then said, you know what, we're good. We're already qualified to the World Cup. They qualified after the Bahrain game, the first team to qualify for the World Cup, and congratulations. But that doesn't mean that you can just sit back and chill in this match against Saudi Arabia. I realize I have a very aggressive stance on what I'm about to say, and I don't expect everybody to agree with me, and I do expect some people to say that I hate Japan and whatever, all this other stuff that they want to say, and that's fine. I realize what's coming my way, but I think how Japan approached this game and how they've approached, I would say, the last 4 World Cup qualifiers is a bit shameful, where you can see the team isn't putting in maximum effort. And I wouldn't even say they're putting in 80% effort part of the time. And I know that some people will say it's because Japan are the most talented team in Asia. It's because they've already qualified. It's because their players have to go back to Europe soon. What was the point? The game doesn't matter. I see these opinions a lot online, and it makes me so angry when people try to excuse shit performances by saying that a game doesn't matter. First off, every World Cup qualifier matters. You do not get to disrespect this stage of the tournament because you are Japan. You only have so many opportunities to play competitive games in an environment in which both teams are, at least theoretically, trying 100%. They are trying to beat you. They are not experimenting. They are not going through a walk in the park with a dog. They are trying to win. And for you, Japan, to approach a game against Saudi Arabia, who is a rival, some people were saying it's not a rivalry. It's absolutely a rivalry. Is it the same rivalry as South Korea? No. Is it the same rivalry as Australia? No. Granted, it's still a rivalry. And you know what the irony in that is? The game against Australia was the exact same. The game against Bahrain, that's not a rivalry, but it was the exact same effort level. There is a problem with the team, with the leadership, with the hierarchy, with the manager. If I watch 3 consecutive games at home and I can't tell which one is the rivalry game, I can't tell which game is supposed to matter more. Because it didn't look like it against Australia. Guys were walking in that game too. Didn't look like it against Bahrain. Players were walking in that one too. And it certainly didn't look like it against Saudi Arabia for the last 70 minutes. Let's not even talk about how disrespectful that is to the fans who pay good money to go see their favorite players play. The fans don't care that you're already qualified, bro. They want to see their national team play with pride. And can you say Japan played with pride against Saudi Arabia? Absolutely not. Are you having a laugh? I'm a person who has higher expectations for Japan than most. I love the Japanese national team. If they won the World Cup, I would faint from happiness. But because of that, because of the standard that I hold this team, which should be looking at a quarterfinals minimum at the World Cup, ideally a semifinal, you cannot be approaching World Cup qualifying like this. It is insulting. And if you're Japan, let me just answer me this, y'all, down below in the comments. All right, I'm ranting full on now. I realize this. I don't care. What game is more important for Japan to prepare for the World Cup? A competitive World Cup qualifier against a team in Saudi Arabia that's a rival and absolutely must not lose this game, or a friendly game in a non-competitive environment against the Netherlands in a neutral venue? Which game prepares Japan better for the World Cup? I'm not saying the Netherlands game has no value. Of course it does. But you're going to wipe your ass with the opportunity to have to break down a very good defensive team in Saudi Arabia and prove that, okay, we can in fact do this. And again, a game where the Saudis are trying to kill you. They're not here for fun. They're here to their World Cup dreams are on the line here. You're not going to play an opponent that is trying harder. Or you're going to play the Dutch team, who they don't respect you anyways because you're Asian, and they're probably going to be playing at 60 or 70%. Like, what are we talking about here? You cannot waste opportunities like that. You have to go out there and try to win every single game. Japan did not try to win. They did not try to win. I was really, really annoyed watching the game. Now, would Japan have won if they had a Yasei Ueda up top instead of Daisen Maeda, who couldn't finish whatsoever, missed multiple one-on-one chances, had a shot off the bar? Sure. But Ueda wasn't playing. I don't care that Mitoma wasn't playing. I don't care that Morita wasn't playing. You go out there to try to win. Not go out there to try to get a warm-up in. And if we're really getting into it, who are Japan to treat qualifying like this? What has Japan done in a World Cup to treat this process like this? Nothing. How many knockout games have you won? 0. You don't have an Asian Cup since 2015. It's been 10 years. Who are you to turn your nose up like this at Asian competition? This is the exact mentality that got Japan beat by Iran in the quarterfinals. You didn't even make the semis of your federational tournament. How dare you approach World Cup qualifying like this? I'm pissed, man. I don't know if you guys can tell. I'm still pretty heated about it because it's shameful performance. And you know what? There's going to be a time at the World Cup where Japan's really put up against it, and they're going to be like, damn, we weren't mentally prepared. We got shell-shocked. Just like they got shell-shocked against Iran when they knocked them out of the Asian Cup. So, mentality-wise, F- for Japan. You cannot rely on your talent. You cannot, because it's not enough in the World Cup. You need to have a killer mentality at all times. I want nothing more than to see you at the semifinal. But seeing stuff like this, it shakes the faith. It really does. Now, monologue over, I'll get to the positive things. First team to qualify for the World Cup. Is that really an accomplishment for Japan? Not really. But it is a positive, so congratulations. Number 2, I already mentioned him, Takefusa Kubo. He's very hot and cold for the Samurai Blue, but it was a lot more hot than it was cold this window. Especially a window where I thought Kaoru Mitoma got pocketed against Bahrain. Wataru Endo, mentioned him earlier. Heart and soul of this team. If we're talking MVPs of World Cup qualifying, he's top 5, no doubt. I mean, he's top 3, no doubt. That's how good he is. Zion Suzuki didn't have a lot to do, but made a couple pretty good reads of the game, mainly in Bahrain. I do remember one instance in the Saudi Arabia game. I think he needed to come out of his box to header a long ball away. He looks like he's getting more and more comfortable. And this makes sense. He's getting first-team football in Italy, and he's already had the disappointment at the Asian Cup, and now he's got, I don't even know how many caps for Japan, 20 maybe? It's really, really good to see that. I think the biggest negative for Japan, outside of the fact that they mentally didn't care at all about the Saudi Arabia game, is the striker position. I mentioned him earlier, Daisen Maeda. You look at Furuhashi, I didn't feel like he made any difference whatsoever when he came on the pitch. It really is Ayase Ueda or bust with this team, hence why the show Blue Lock exists. You know, you need a striker, and Japan do not have one, at least not a very good one. I think Ueda is the best of the bunch, and I don't think that's up for debate anymore, but this is another thing that could potentially bite the team in the butt. You know, when the wingers aren't putting the goals and the shots in the back of the net, who's going to do that? Is there somebody that can step up and just win a ball in the air and put it in the back of the net. I'm an Hussein type. I don't really know if Japan's got the answer there. So I do not think it was a great window for Japan. If I give Australia an A+, I'd probably give Japan a C minus. C minus for this window. 4 points, sure, but if you're calling this a dub, you're way too soft on this team, and I don't think you think that they can reach the levels that I think they can reach. So anyways, I'll move on to Bahrain next. They had the 2-0 loss away to Japan. I don't think Bahrain were terrible in this game, and I actually think until the Daichi Kamada breakthrough goal that Bahrain looked like they might even be able to get a draw here, which would have been massive for their campaign. I mean, they were defending for their lives in this match. Just eventually Japan's individual quality and a couple of good moments of team play proved to be too strong. On the Takefusa Kubo second goal, where he slots it past the goalkeeper near post, is probably something that Luftala should save, and I know a lot of people were talking about that, and it was a mistake, but I do want to acknowledge that moments before that, Kubo again is cutting in from the left-hand side of the field, takes a touch inside, takes a shot that looks like it's certified going top right corner, and Luftala gets his hands on it, and I actually think it's maybe the best save I've ever seen him make for Bahrain. Really, really impressive from him. But overall, just didn't do enough. Bahrain have been beaten soundly, 3 times in a row by Japan. Aggregate score being 10-1. It's like Iran versus UAE. There's levels to this, and Bahrain are just not on the level of Japan. Now, going into the Indonesia game, this was a winnable fixture for Bahrain. Indonesians might not want to admit that. This was a winnable game for Bahrain. But it was a revenge game for the Indonesians. And this was always going to be a dogfight. This was always going to be intense. Indonesians feel like they got cheated in the 2-2 draw, the infamous 2-2 draw away in Rifa. And Bahrain simply did not show up. Simply did not show up in this match. I think it was a relatively even affair in terms of possession and who had moments of controlling the game. But if you look at quality of chances, Indonesia should have had 3 goals. Bahrain probably should have had 1. They got outplayed. And this is a game where I feel like the weaknesses of this team really got exposed. And I talked about it earlier, that they have a strong 11 and then nothing else. Really nothing else. Bahrain have been feeding off chaos, right? They are the dementors of Asian football. And they've been just, sucking the life out of China, not really knowing, what the hell is going on with Wu Lei and who's going to replace him. And we got these random Brazilians in here. What do? You got Australia. Graham Arnold's at the end of his tenure. I mean, we're still relying on Mitchell Duke. It's just a disaster. They have no offensive capability whatsoever. And then you got the Saudis, who Mancini and the players hate each other, and Al Dossri's missing pens, and then he's getting injured, and Mohamed Kano's suspended, and then you have Indonesia, who've got a different starting 11 in every single game because they've recruited 200 players to show up for the national team, and Bahrain are just feeding on it all and just staying in this good position right in the middle of qualification, capitalizing on everybody else's mistakes, because that is the biggest strength of Bahrain: consistency and chemistry. They got the same attack every game. Nobody needs to check what the starting 11 is going to be on FootMob. You can bet who the players are going to be. They got almost the same starting midfield every single game. And if they don't have the same players, they have basically a clone to just throw in the lineup and play as a destroying central midfielder. They got the same goalkeeper. They got the same back line. And they're just doing whatever they need to do to stay competitive and stay in the conversation. But I think the juju ran out in this game. And namely, Amine Benati, who is one of Bahrain's center backs, I actually think he's arguably their second or third best player, he was suspended for the Indonesia game for a yellow card accumulation against Japan. And you can see the difference in this 11 and how they play when just one guy's out. You can see the difference when Benati's not playing. You can see the difference when Vincent Emmanuel has to start at right back instead of Al Shamsan. You can see the difference immediately. God forbid Mohamed Marhoun gets injured and has to come out. I don't know what's going to happen to the attack. An attack that's actually quite good because they all know each other and they know exactly what they're going to do. But against Indonesia, it was just a fish that was too big to fry. Indonesia were not scared. They came at them. They wanted revenge. Bahrain, maybe they were a little intimidated by all the threats and stuff they received online. I'm not sure. They got rattled. and they were pretty fortunate that it was just a 1-0 defeat. And ultimately, 0 points in this window for Bahrain is a nightmare. And they're on the brink of direct elimination in round 3. And I think Bahrain and what they've done so far, it would be cruel in a way for them to suffer the same fate as a North Korea. But, I mean, that's just how the cookie crumbles, homie. Like, you can't take 0 points in a window. You absolutely cannot. I don't care who you are. You got to pick up 1 point at least. And they were unable to do that in, again, manageable circumstances against Indonesia. Let's not act like Indonesia's a super team. I mean, they beat Australia away in a flukish manner. They got a draw away against Saudi Arabia. You couldn't get a draw away against Indonesia? It just, yeah, I think the real level of this team has been found out. They're probably around the 10th to 11th best team in Asia. That's just kind of how they are, and they have no superpower except they don't usually make a ton of mistakes like everybody else was. And I think the circus is over, and I think they got Saudi Arabia at home next. I don't remember what the last game is. No, it can't be China. I'm not sure who it is. It must be Australia maybe, but anyways, doesn't matter. Oh, it's going to be a long shot. Oh, it's China away. I have that written in my notes. It's China away. Must wins. I mean, Bahrain have to win out. They have to win the last 2 games, or they're done. They're completely done. If they take 3 points, it might not even be enough to avoid direct elimination. Really, really bad window for Bahrain. Moving on to Indonesia. 5-1 loss to Australia that I talked about earlier. I think regardless of the circumstances, it's unacceptable to concede 5. Right? This is the Indonesia of old, as many would like to suggest. The old Indonesia that used to get pumped for 5 by Iraq and couldn't beat anybody outside of Southeast Asia. The old Indonesia that Shin Tae-yong works tirelessly to eliminate. And Patrick Kluivert in his first match with Indonesia eats 5. Now, I do think the 5 was flattering for Australia. I mentioned that earlier. Indonesia didn't deserve to concede 5. Their high line was naive, and the formation was ridiculous, but they didn't deserve to concede 5. And had Indonesia converted the penalty, it could have been a dream debut for Kluivert. Could have been a dream debut for Dix and all the other guys who got their starts in this match. Romney and everybody else. And in the end, it became kind of a nightmare. Obviously, Romney gets the consolation goal. It's a great goal, taking over Jason Garia. Really, really good goal. And I think Indonesia could have crumbled after this. They really could, because they were getting flamed. They were getting flamed by me for sacking Shin Tae-yong and then losing 5-1. It was unacceptable. But then they win 1-0 at home against Bahrain. And now Indonesia's in 4th place, man. And it looks like that round 4 is really going to happen. It's really going to happen. I can't believe what we're seeing here. I said that if Indonesia got 5 points, it was a massive dub. They're on what? 9 right now? 9 freaking points. It is a successful campaign for the Indonesian national team. And like I said, they should have beat Bahrain by multiple goals. I mean, the miss by Marcelino Ferdinand, I think he thought he was playing on Saudi Arabia again and wanted to be the hero. I mean, it was just a really, really bad shot, terrible decision. He had Romney wide open for a tap-in goal, and he just puts the ball into the 50th row. Not the greatest game from Marcelino. Really good game from, what's my boy's name in the center back position? Risky, I think. Had a header clearance off the goal line at one point. Really, really strong match from him. So Indonesia responded exactly how you would want a team trying to qualify to the World Cup to respond. I think in terms of possession, it was a pretty even game, much like it was in Rifa. The main difference was that Indonesia didn't make the same mistakes that they made in Rifa, and they were able to clean up shop, created the better chances. This time they put them away. Remember in extra time when it was a 3-on-1, Rafael Stroik and 2 others against one Bahrain defender, and they were unable to complete the pass, the squared pass to a teammate that would have made it 3-1, and Indonesia would have won. And dude, they'd be on 11 points right now. They'd be above Saudi Arabia in 3rd if they had done that. So the team learned, and they took a step up in this window by beating Bahrain. So I think overall for Indonesia, it's a good window, despite the Australia beatdown, because you get the 3 points against Bahrain. Next match is China at home. That has to be 3 points again. Also a revenge game. Another revenge game. They get back-to-back revenge games, so I'm very curious to see what they do there. And then Japan away. A Japan that will, without a doubt, be playing not only a B squad, but probably a group of guys that don't care if the Saudi Arabia game is anything to indicate. And before people start saying, oh, it's still impossible, even if it's a Japan B team, I mean, never forget when Vietnam got a draw away in Japan in World Cup qualifying. I know I'll never forget that because I thought Japan were going to go out there and stop 4-0. And instead, they kind of barely tried, much like Japan had been barely trying for 2 windows now. And Vietnam, they draw 1-1. I think Maya Yoshida got an own goal and a goal in that game, if I remember. A bit of an interesting performance from him. That's neither here nor there. It's not impossible for Indonesia to get a draw. It really isn't, because they're going to be going for it, guns blazing. And if Japan's like, we're Japan, we don't need to try, Indonesia could get something there. I'm not kidding. Moving on to some players. Hilgers, Dix, Reinders was not that impressed with any of those guys. I'm not going to lie. I don't trust anything that Indonesians say about their players online. Not because I don't trust you guys, being Indonesians, but because you only say positive things. So I can't believe any of it because everybody's like, oh my God, this guy's going to be the best. He's going to be the best right back in Asia. Oh my God, this guy's so good. Oh my God, our midfield's going to be on top. No, I just don't believe any of it. I wasn't impressed with any of those guys. But Romani, I think I was saying Romney earlier. Maybe, is it Romani or Romney? I don't know. Somebody tell me down below. He looks like one of the better commitments that Indonesia have gotten. I can't believe I just said commitments. Like, this is goddamn college football. Like, 5-star wide receiver going to Ohio State. Like, commit 5-star recruit Ollie Romani for the Indonesian national team. I mean, that's just really how it is now at this point. 2 goals in his opening window. You cannot ask for anything better than that. Huge moment against Bahrain as well to get this team 3 points. Patrick Kluivert, last thing here. Has he vindicated his appointment? No. No, he is not. And the reason I say that is because I genuinely believe Shin Tae-yong as manager would have beat Bahrain at home. Jack, how can you say that? Kluivert, no. Here, I'll tell you exactly how I can say that. Because Shin Tae-yong, as Indonesia manager, beat a better team, Saudi Arabia, by more goals, 2-0, than what Kluivert did to Bahrain. I guess the one similarity is that Indonesia should have won by more goals against Saudi Arabia, and Indonesia should have won by more goals against Bahrain. But I can't say that this is some statement win that Shin Tae-yong didn't get. You know what's crazy is that if Shin Tae-yong was here, he would have beaten both Bahrain and Saudi Arabia as Indonesia manager, which would easily go down as like the most epic, goated campaign for any manager in their history. And instead, we got to split the results because we got a sacking in here right after a historic result. Just crazy how unfair football can be sometimes. I think it's still a massive gamble. And I don't think we're going to know if the Kluivert appointment was a good or bad thing until the conclusion of round 4. Right? Because if Indonesia go into round 4 and they get blitzed, then again, I just think we're sitting here saying, why did they fire Shin Tae-yong? But we'll just have to wait and see. Moving on to China, last team here. I guess I had to save the worst for last. 1-0 loss to Saudi Arabia. Should have been way freaking more, I'll be honest. And the 2-0 loss at home to Australia. I don't even know what to say about China. I got the fewest bullet points about this team than anybody else. They're just not good, and there's no other way to say it. And if you're not good, you cannot be shooting yourselves in the foot, getting a red card away against Saudi Arabia and Riyadh. What on earth are you doing? If you look at China, as awful as they are, the fact that they were moments, arguably, from beating Saudi Arabia at home would have changed this group yet again. What would this group look like if China had gotten 3 points on that match day? They shot themselves in the foot twice against the same team. The same team. It's ridiculous. There's probably another instance of them shooting themselves in the foot that I can't remember right now, but offensively, they're the worst team in round 3. No tech, no interplay, no athleticism, no real strength whatsoever. Here's the way forward for China. If they get another point or whatever, it's fine. They're eliminated. If Branko Ivankovic is staying, which I don't think he is because he's 71 years old, promote the entire U20 team to the senior squad and move forward. If Branko Ivankovic is not staying, which he's probably not, I bet you his contract expires very soon, probably in the next year, then the next guy that comes in needs to promote the entire U20 squad and move forward, because that is the only way to progress with China. You are not getting anything from this current generation, so why even bother? Just move on. What are we doing here? It's terrible. I mean, you cannot tell me there's not a goalkeeper on the same level as Dalai Wang. He's 35. He's not getting any better. You're telling me there's not one guy in the Chinese Super League who's like 24 that we can just throw in there. Could he be worse than Dalai Wang? I find that hard to believe. So please, let's just get this over with. What are we waiting for? You're not qualifying to the World Cup. There's no way. And I want China to be good. It's fun when China are good. They're the big bad. It's awesome. But they're not big right now. They're just bad. They're just the bad right now. And I'm here for the Chinese Renaissance. I just don't know. I just don't know when or how. Well, I do know how. I don't know when this is going to take place. And I'm not sure if the Chinese FA is going to really have the balls to try to enforce a hard switch like that, a generational shift. I will say for one positive about China, they have easily the best home field advantage of any East Asian team. And it's not even close. I actually think the Chinese crowds put the Koreans and the Japanese to shame. To shame. To think that those fans get up there. I heard they arrived 4 hours before the Australia game. And they are singing and chanting and hooting and hollering, watching that dog shit for 90 minutes is commendable. Those fans deserve a Japanese national team. Those fans deserve a Korean national team. And I think Korean and Japanese fans could probably take some notes. Because the vibe in Japan, dead, bro. Dead. The vibe in South Korea, dead. It's like we're watching golf out here. There's no intimidation whatsoever. Teams aren't scared to go to South Korea. Teams aren't scared to go to Japan. But they're probably a little scared to go away to China. Because those fans are intimidated. I see a giant red dragon tifo in front of me. Are you kidding? I got fireworks popping off in the back. Yeah, like I'm going to be like, okay. Let's get out of here. I don't really want to chill here. Crazy. So shout out to China for that because I think their fans are probably the best part of the national team outside of their still absolute beast mode red kit, which I saw iShowSpeed wearing in a video, and I just felt so mad because how did this guy get that? I swear I looked online on the official Nike store and it wasn't there. So does my guy just have the plug in Shenzhen or something like that? Like, if I got any Chinese subscribers or viewers, man, y'all DM me on Twitter. Link in the description. Help a brother out because I need that Chinese kid. It just goes so freaking hard. And this video has gone so freaking long. So I think it's time to end it. Those are my thoughts about every single team in Group C. After the March window, I knew I was not going to keep this under 20 minutes. I think this is actually a 45-minute video, so I completely failed in that objective, but I hope you guys enjoyed the content. If you did, make sure you subscribe for future AFC videos here on Dead Ball TV and drop the video a like if you could. I would really appreciate it. Finally, if you shared the channel with a friend, somebody else that's, a fan of Japanese football or of the Socceroos or the Chinese national team, it doesn't matter if you think they would enjoy these videos. Share with a friend. I'd really appreciate that. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end the video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see y'all in the next one.